I call this hearing to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. I'd like to begin first by thanking Representative Williams for joining me today in the capacity of ranking member for the subcommittee, filling in for Congressman Hagedorn, who I normally sit beside and hold these hearings. And I think it's okay to say, given his public statements, that we are thinking of him. The entire entire Congress, the entire committee, and I know the staff of the committee as well. I want to send him our very best wishes, and I would personally offer him my prayers and very best wishes. I look forward to talking with him. I hope soon, and just all our best wishes for his health and well-being. Mr. Williams, thanks for joining us today. First things first, I will just point out a couple of housekeeping issues, House and committee rules, and practices continue to apply when we're having remote proceedings. This means all members should expect to, or are expected to, adhere to standing rules, including those around decorum when participating in remote events. With that said, the technology we're using today requires some small modifications to ensure that members can fully participate in these proceedings. House regulations require members to be visible through a video connection throughout the proceeding, so keep your cameras on, and if you have to participate in another proceeding, please exit and log back in later. In the event a member encounters technical issues that prevent you from being recognized for questioning, I'll move to the next available member of the same party, and we'll recognize that member at the next appropriate time slot. Should a member's time be interrupted by technical issues, sorry, that's just a repeat. In the event that a witness loses their connectivity during testimony or questioning, I will preserve their time as staff work with them to try and fix the technical issue. We may need to recess the proceedings to provide time for the witness to reconnect. And finally, remember to remain muted until you're recognized in order to help minimize background noise. In accordance with the rules, staff have been advised to mute participants only when there is inadvertent background noise that's disrupting the hearing. Should a member wish to be recognized, they need to unmute themselves and seek recognition at the appropriate time. With that, I'll provide an opening statement. The health of the economy in rural communities is strongly tied to the overall well-being of the American economy. Rural areas hold the vast majority of our country's land and supply the rest of the country with the food, water, and energy we depend on. And yet, as a representative of one of the most rural districts in the country, I've seen many examples of the ways rural communities are ignored by the federal government and left out of the national political debate. Even when Washington discusses rural America, rural Americans themselves are provided little opportunity to give their actual input. They are essentially often the subject of debate rather than leading the debate themselves. As a result, the federal government often makes half-hearted attempts to spur economic development in rural communities. Programs are targeted more towards urban and suburban areas, where the money is, without much thought for how those programs impact rural communities or could be changed to better help rural business owners like farmers, small-scale manufacturers, fishermen, loggers here in Maine, and there are many other examples all over the country. The Office of Rural Affairs within the Small Business Administration is a classic symbol of how the federal government and Congress often fails in its commitment to rural America. As a good friend of mine is known to say about politics and government, too often when all is said and done, more will be said than done. The SBA Office of Rural Affairs was first established in 1990 during the first Bush administration to provide information and assistance to rural businesses. However, the office has been left largely vacant since 2005. When I arrived in Congress in 2019, I was upset to learn that the office was dormant and worked with a group of like-minded members on this committee to raise the issue with the Trump administration. The administration was receptive and became the first in nearly 15 years to devote resources to the office, Given that the office has been either empty or wildly under-resourced for years, it's no wonder that one of the problems I hear most about SBA from rural small business owners in my district is that they just don't know much about their services, such as small business development centers or the SCORE partnership, or believe that their loans, SBA loans that is, aren't competitive or come with too many bureaucratic strings attached. I was encouraged that the acting director of the office was able to hire additional staff in 2020, thanks to funding from the CARES Act. Congress should provide the office with a dedicated funding authorization so that it can build on what was accomplished in 2019 and 2020, rather than fading away again to leave rural businesses without an advocate within the SBA. This office can and should play an important role in connecting rural Americans to programs and services that can help their businesses and subsequently help their communities. It should also play a role in bringing feedback from rural businesses back to the SBA headquarters, regionally and nationally, so that it can make improvements to better serve these important businesses. I hope that today's hearing can help provide us with some good feedback on how we can strengthen the Office of Rural Affairs and other initiatives to support rural businesses. I see the same value in the office that the Trump administration saw, and that members of this committee in the last Congress saw. And I believe that this work is long overdue and important to so many communities across the country. I look forward to working with my colleagues on this subcommittee to continue to ensure that rural communities get the attention and support that they deserve. I'd now like to yield to Mr. Williams for his opening statement. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Golden. I want to thank you for allowing me to fill in for Ranking Member Hagedorn, who we're all praying for as we sit here today. Today's hearing is of the utmost importance as we're going to be exploring the nation's rural small businesses, how they've fared under COVID-19 and what they face moving forward. Despite their strong work ethic and dedication, America's small businesses, entrepreneurs, and startups faced extreme challenges dealing with COVID-19 and the state and local shutdown measures that followed. Without having the ability to make safe, sound, and prudent business decisions, mandates were handed down that caused businesses to change their operations or even close. Thankfully, Congress worked with former President Trump to enact and activate a number of critically important small business relief programs, including the quick-moving Paycheck Protection Program. These relief programs, combined with states opening up, started the sequence of events that provided small businesses with the opportunity to look toward recovery. Unfortunately, not all states have maintained the same speed of reopening. However, in my state of Texas, we had the benefit of opening up quickly, and we are seeing results as compared to those states that have stayed closed for a longer period of time. Moreover, as the country opens back up, small businesses are now faced with a set of difficult realities. While historically operating on thin margins, America's Main Street is facing a new threat of inflation. The price of everything from gasoline to products that we use every day are climbing at the fastest pace we've seen in almost a decade. And just this morning, the government published new CPI numbers that shows that they've increased to 5.4% over the last 12 months. Additionally, labor and workforce issues continue to challenge business owners as they search for employees. And according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are over 9.2 million job openings across the nation. And unfortunately, help wanted signs are becoming all too familiar. And I can tell you that we see that in my business every day. On top of inflation and not being able to find workers, the Biden administration is threatening the nation's best job creators with tax increases. Now, whether it's increases to the individual's tax rate, the corporate rate, or increasing capital gains tax, these changes will hurt small business directly and indirectly and have lasting effects for small businesses in my state of Texas to Minnesota and beyond, coast to coast. Instead of promoting a pro-growth environment like we should be to help small businesses recover quickly from the past year and a half, this administration is putting up roadblocks and hurdles and making small business owners very defensive. Over the past year, this committee, and especially this subcommittee, have put a focus on strengthening some of the nation's COVID programs for rural small businesses. We have found common ground on rural issues in the past, and I look forward to continuing to work with my colleagues to find solutions for all of our rural small businesses. And as members of Congress, we must work together to bring back the pro-growth environment that the nation experienced prior to COVID-19, an environment we had not seen in many, many years. I hadn't seen it in the 51 years I've been in business. I look forward to today's conversation. I especially want to thank our witnesses for being with us. Instead of running their shops today, they are with us to discuss these important topics. I thank you for joining us, and I look forward to hearing from each one of you. And Mr. Chairman, again, thank you, and I yield my time back.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Take a quick moment here to explain how the hearing will proceed. Each witness will have 5 minutes to provide a statement, and each committee member will have 5 minutes for questions. Please ensure that your microphone is on when you begin speaking and that you return to mute when finished. And with that, we'll introduce our witnesses. Our first witness is Mr. Nathan Oley, the CEO of the Rural Community Assistance Partnership, a national nonprofit focused on economic development for rural communities, assisting rural communities across the country as they work to build capacity and resiliency. Mr. Oley has been a leader in economic development for more than a decade, serving as senior advisor at the U.S. Economic Development Administration under the Obama administration and on the White House Rural Council. Thank you for joining us today. Our second witness is Ms. Jessica Campos of the Center for Rural Affairs, the director of the Women's Business Center. She coordinates the Rural Enterprise Assistance Project. Ms. Campos is focused on promoting the growth of women and minority-owned small businesses through programs that provide training, technical assistance, and access to credit and capital. She has a background in banking and finance, including more than a decade of experience providing financial education to consumers, small business owners, and their employees. Thank you for joining us today. Our third witness is Mr. Brett Challenger, Senior Vice President at CoBank, one of the largest providers of credit to the U.S. rural economy. Mr. Challenger heads up CoBank's regional agribusiness banking group and also has experience with CoBank's energy and water divisions. Additionally, Mr. Challenger led CoBank's efforts with SBA to provide PPP loans to customers, which involved developing the entire program from the ground up at CoBank. Thank you for joining us today as well. And now I'll recognize Mr. Williams to introduce his witness.
Thank you, Ranking Member and Chairman Golden, for extending me this opportunity to introduce one of our witnesses. And I'm proud to introduce Mr. Alan Crawford. Mr. Crawford is the president and owner of Ranger Manufacturing Company in Cleburne, Texas, which is located right in the middle of my District 25 here in Texas. Ranger Manufacturing Company assembles cabinetry products for homes across the nation, including our military. The business started in 1948 and was purchased by Mr. Crawford when he was an employee of the company in 2014. Prior to purchasing the Ranger Manufacturing Company, he was in engineering and operations management for the business. He has truly seen this business from all sides. Mr. Crawford has been able to grow the company from approximately 55 workers to just under 100 today. With a degree in industrial engineering and an MBA from Texas Tech University, Mr. Crawford has had an extensive career working in manufacturing, including expertise and experience with metal fabrication, semiconductors, and telecom. Now, he knows I'm a TCU Horned Frog. However, I can appreciate Texas Tech University and all of the other great schools and universities in my home state of Texas and people that they put out and help us with our economy. Mr. Crawford, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. You and I are friends, and I've been to your office and seen your facility. We look forward to hearing more about your small business experience, how your company was impacted by COVID-19, and the discussion on how Congress can assist in the recovery of our rural small businesses. Again, thank you for taking time out of your busy day to come educate all of us on this subcommittee. Mr. Chairman, I turn my time back.
Thank you very much. We'll now recognize our witnesses for 5 minutes. Mr. Oley, we'll start with you. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Golden, Congressman Williams, and members of the subcommittee for this opportunity to discuss the importance of small business and entrepreneurship in supporting rural communities and how the SBA can help small businesses and entrepreneurs thrive in rural areas. My name is Nathan Oley, and I'm the CEO of the Rural Community Assistance Partnership. RCAP is a national network of nonprofit partners providing technical assistance, training, and resources to rural and tribal communities in every state, territory, and on tribal lands. Through our regional partners, more than 300 technical assistance providers build capacity that strengthens rural economies. Our approach is grounded in long-term, trusted relationships with thousands of rural communities across the country. Last year, RCAP served more than 3.4 million rural and tribal residents in more than 2,000 rural communities, with an average population of 1,500 and a median household income of half the national average. In addition, with people of color representing 21% of the rural population and 83% of rural population growth, we support a rural America that is increasingly diverse. The talent, innovation, and resiliency of America's rural areas will play a central role in the future of the U.S. economy. COVID-19 has further exacerbated the challenges rural communities face, as they had not fully recovered yet from the 2008 recession. Now is the time to drive real and sustained change. Small business growth is the best way to reinvigorate the economy, especially in rural areas. The days of chasing after one big manufacturer are gone, replaced by a growing need to drive small business growth that intentionally embeds wealth locally, lifting up regions in a more equitable fashion. According to a July 2020 survey from NPR, over 40% of rural households reported having household members that had been furloughed, lost a job, or had wages or hours reduced as a result of COVID. That same report said that over 30% of rural households had reported using all or most of their savings during COVID-19, including over 80% of Black and Latino households. Small businesses are the biggest drivers of economic growth in the United States, employing 47% of the US workforce and generating 2/3 of new jobs. In rural areas, people are more likely to be small business owners, and these businesses tend to be more resilient than in larger communities. The SBA features a portfolio of small business lending and grant programs. Given that small businesses in rural communities are essential to the economic recovery efforts, an intentional focus on these programs is necessary to ensure that the smallest and lowest resource communities are not left behind. I want to thank this committee for all that it has done to support rural small businesses, in particular, creating the Paycheck Protection Program. After significant advocacy efforts to help fill a major gap in rural communities, Community Development Financial Institutions, or CDFIs, were granted the opportunity to become PPP lenders. Two of RCAP's regional partners, RCAC and Communities Unlimited, participated in PPP as CDFIs. CDFIs provide loans to small businesses, often pairing funding with technical assistance, helping to build capacity and ensuring that those that need assistance the most receive it. For example, when Communities Unlimited began processing PPP loans, they were intentional about reaching out to small-scale growers and small business owners in very rural communities. They immediately reached out to the Millstone Cooperative in Mississippi to connect these Black-owned, small-scale growers to critical funding for their farms during the pandemic. More than 10 members of the Millstone Cooperative were approved for loans from the PPP, getting them the critical funding required to keep their farms during the pandemic. In total, RCAC and CU made 597 loans totaling almost $29 million. There is still a great need, however, for additional PPP funds for rural small businesses, as many got left behind in the final days of the program. This included more than 50 applications totaling almost $2 million from RCAC and CU alone, including many minority-owned businesses on the brink of closing their doors. Despite SBA's many successes, a substantial number of rural small businesses have difficulty accessing SBA programs. With help from experienced technical assistance providers, rural and tribal small businesses can better access and manage federal funds. Technical assistance plays a vital role in ensuring that programs serve the vulnerable small businesses they were designed to support. The newly created Community Navigator pilot program addresses these issues and should be made permanent. This program supplies grants to organizations with deep ties to rural communities to engage trusted, culturally knowledgeable field staff to conduct technical assistance and outreach. Technical assistance is key to fostering strong financial management, which in turn mitigates the risk for capital investments, unlocking capital badly needed in these communities. In closing, the services provided through SBA deliver critical assistance to small and disadvantaged communities where it is most needed, especially as our country continues to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. We must use the pandemic to put a stake in the ground, to start thinking innovatively about how we address the systemic and long-term inequities that have led to rural America falling behind its urban counterparts. If we don't, we may never make up that gap. I thank the committee for inviting me to testify and look forward to working with you and your colleagues on these important issues.
Thank you very much. We'll now recognize Ms. Campos for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Jessica Campos, and I am the Women's Business Center Director for the Center for Rural Affairs. The Center for Rural Affairs has been a leading force engaging people to create a better rural future since 1973. The Center's history of innovative, insightful, and effective work for rural America provides a solid foundation from which we continue to build. We became the host organization for the Women's Business Center, a service funded by the SBA's Office of Women's Business Ownership in 2001. And this entity has functioned as a primary educational and technical assistance provider for the Center's Small Business Development Program ever since. Demand for the services we provide continues to grow. In the past 3 years alone, 2,795 aspiring or existing business owners have completed CFRA technical assistant programs. This has led to 164 business starts, 327 loans, and 557 jobs created or retained. During this time, CFRA staff provided 20,342 hours of business counseling over 16,693 sessions. Small business development is so important in rural communities. Next to agriculture, small business is the most critical economic engine in Nebraska. According to a 2018 SBA report, 47% of our working population work for a small business or are self-employed. Micro-business development is especially important in rural areas where access to employment opportunities are limited and where jobs pay less. For many people, micro-businesses provide all or most of their household income. Self-employment provides up to 90% of all jobs in many rural Nebraska counties. Our target market is disadvantaged people living in rural Nebraska. This includes women and families who earn low to moderate income and Latinos who currently run or want to start a small business. To maximize client success, our Women's Business Center operates as a center without walls, which means we go to where the client is, both physically and educationally. We provide many services at the business location, and we meet at the client's level of understanding. We offer services both online and in person in evolving communities and designated opportunity zones. In order to help us succeed, the committee can help facilitate this important work by supporting 3 key policy changes. First, permanently waive the 50% limit on pre- and post-loan technical assistant grant expenses for prospective borrowers. Naturally, providing the exact same amount of time on TA after a loan approval is not necessary when pre-loan training and education is effective. Next, it is important to fully fund the Women's Business Center program at $30 million in core funding, provide an additional $48 million COVID-related appropriation, and waive the match requirement until fiscal year of 2023. The increase in core funding for the WBC program would support the increase in clientele and services we are currently experiencing. Separately, the additional COVID relief-related funding and waived match requirement would extend the support provided in statute to help WBCs over the past year. With new business starts at an all-time high, demand for our services will grow, and these priorities would enable WBCs to continue the efforts we have adopted over the past year into fiscal year 23 to support entrepreneurs in need. Finally, we encourage lawmakers to support funding for the Office of Rural Affairs at SBA. The number of federal programs available to small businesses has increased over the past 18 months. This requires development of new rules and regulations on a frequent basis. We rely on SBA.gov for these announcements, but simply placing new information on a website is not enough for those of us who spend so much time on the road and meeting with clients. Having a consistent, rural-focused resource at SBA can help ensure we know where to go with any questions or concerns. To conclude, I'd like to thank you, and we appreciate the opportunity to share our perspective and look forward to working with members of this committee to develop and institute needed changes. Once again, thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Challenger, we'll hear from you for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. Thank you for calling this hearing, and it's a privilege to be here. I'm Brett Challenger. I'm the Senior Vice President of our Regional Agribusiness Banking Group for CoBank in Greenwood Village, Colorado. The bank provides loans, leases, export financing, and other financial services to agribusiness and rural power, water, and communications providers in all 50 states. CoBank is a proud member of the Farm Credit System and also provides wholesale loans and other financial services to 20 affiliated farm credit associations, serving more than 75,000 farmers, ranchers, and other rural borrowers in 23 states. We're immensely proud of the value and customer service we provide our customer owners across rural America. Financial strength and stability are critical to fulfill our mission to serve rural communities. Organized as a cooperative, CoBank's earnings go back directly to our customers, not outside shareholders. Over the past 5 years, CoBank has distributed $3.27 billion in patronage back to our customers across rural America, highlighting the enduring value of the cooperative model. March 2020 brought tremendous uncertainty to CoBank. Our board and management made decisions enhancing our ability to respond to the economic challenges COVID-19 brought to our customers. In April of 2020, CoBank and 52 other farm credit institutions mobilized to deliver Paycheck Protection Program loans. While a few farm credit associations had previously been Small Business Administration lenders, most, including CoBank, had not. I was fortunate to lead CoBank's team to stand up the delivery mechanism for this economic lifeline. CoBank's employees proceeded to help 318 customers obtain more than $418 million in PPP loans. System-wide, Farm Credit delivered $2.29 billion in 51,760 PPP loans to customers across the country, saving well over 126,000 jobs in rural America. When we experienced challenges, the Office of Rural Affairs answered hundreds of questions via email and phone calls for us. They hosted 2 webinars for our customers to help navigate the loan application and forgiveness documentation. The staff went above and beyond while we at CoBank were delivering a program brand new to us and also partnering with an agency which we had no familiarity with. Without the Office of Rural Affairs, we would not have been as successful in executing PPP loans or navigating our customers' forgiveness applications through the SBA process. The cooperative business model can be an answer to helping businesses get started. Lack of interested investors in rural businesses is not a new concept to CoBank. Over the last several years, we've developed a creative solution to address capital needs of small and emerging agriculture cooperatives. CoBank, like all institutions in the Farm Credit System, is closely regulated by the Farm Credit Administration, an independent federal financial regulatory agency. Businesses in the early stage of growth do not traditionally meet underwriting guidelines. To address this, the CoBank board proposed a solution to FCA, creating a separate risk pool designed to provide more flexible financing for these cooperatives. FCA approved the proposal and Co-op Start was launched in 2012. Co-op Start provides flexible financing up to $250,000 to early stage growth agriculture co-ops. To date, Co-op Start has been used by 23 different small cooperatives in 9 states with a total of $2.7 million in commitments and loans and leases. CoBank is committed to fostering the creation of new cooperatives through our support of numerous education and technical assistance programs. But co-ops are not the only answer. CoBank understands that rural entrepreneurs need dependable sources of capital to grow their businesses. Senior debt may be available, but equity and junior capital remain more difficult to source. Few rural-focused investment funds exist beyond those that focus on acquiring farmland. One type of equity investment that CoBank has made is with rural business investment companies licensed by USDA. Since 2013, CoBank has committed $154.5 million to 10 private equity funds, funding over 70 rural businesses across the country. We're strong supporters of the Rural Capital Access Act introduced by Senators Thune, Shaheen, and Fisher. This legislation encourages small business investment companies to invest in rural businesses while also allowing the RBICs who do not currently receive federal appropriation to access leftover funds from the SBIC program. We think collaboration is important in rural America, and at a time when rural communities are doing their best to recover from COVID-19 pandemic, we encourage more attention and investment into their longevity and success. I want to express my strong support for the SBA Office of Rural Affairs and thank them for their support through our efforts through the PPP. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Crawford, we'll have you wrap up the opening part of the hearing here with your 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for taking the time to listen to the voice of small business. Ranger Manufacturing Company has been in business since 1948 and is located in Cleburne, Texas, a small community of about 30,000 people just south of Dallas-Fort Worth. We are a classical manufacturing facility where we punch, form, paint, and assemble steel and plastic products for the residential housing market. It has endured many changes in ownership, product lines, and economic challenges. During the economic turmoil and housing crisis of 2007 and 8, the parent company of Ranger consolidated many of their operations into our plant in Cleburne. I ran the operation for them when we transitioned from manufacturing ventilation products to medicine cabinets. When the product line continued to struggle, I purchased the business from my employer and in January of 2014, started my entrepreneurial dream of owning and operating a manufacturing business. My parents were both public school teachers. My father died when I was in high school, and my mother supported our household the best she could. With financial help from family, bank borrowings, savings, lots of hard work, and mostly God's providential hand, my employees and I have been able to make this opportunity grow and eke out a profit. At the time, we saved about 55 jobs. Today, we make products that support single-family, multifamily, and military housing all around the world. We have more than 300 customers in all 50 states and Canada. Our sales have grown more than 30%, and we have just under 100 employees. The savings from the 2017 tax cuts allowed us to invest in the business, which contributed to this growth until COVID hit. While we took a significant hit to sales early in the pandemic, we were able to mitigate the impact to the business and ended 2020 with sales essentially flat from 2019. We utilized PPP funds to maintain our workforce, pay bonuses, and extend paid leave so that our employees could take the time to deal with COVID in their own personal way. Lately, the current economic environment has proved to be even more challenging than the pandemic. Our product line is not very glamorous, has low margins, and is very fragmented with lots of competition. Our greatest competitive threat is from low-cost foreign manufacturers or large domestic producers that have a much broader product offering and are better capitalized. Tariffs imposed on foreign competitors have helped us immensely, and delays in ocean freight and other logistical problems have driven even greater demand for our products. It's a good problem to have. However, the surge in commodity pricing has been nearly impossible to get in front of. Our material components, such as steel, corrugated, and plastic, have seen cost increases from 15 to 40%. We don't enjoy much pricing power on our products, and consequently, our margins and cash flow are severely challenged in spite of the growth in top-line revenue. Other concerns arising this year have been supply shortages, longer lead times, and difficulty in finding labor. Labor's been a significant challenge in both finding adequate participants and meeting demands for higher wages. We are compelled to work overtime, which drives up labor costs and decreases productivity. These challenges have made it difficult to meet our customers' expectations, and we risk losing them to other suppliers. Unlike businesses with proprietary products, our customers do have a choice. Looming large is the uncertain but promised tax increases from the current administration. I'm concerned about losing the benefit of the bonus depreciation for capital investments. Texas's extraordinary population migration is causing real estate values to explode. The real estate assessed value on my business property has more than doubled, another unplanned tax hit. We continue to deal with the burden from the ACA with increasing costs of mandated health insurance. This regulation is a significant burden to a company the size of mine, as we are just over the threshold to require company-furnished health insurance, but still so small that these costs are a major blow to our bottom line. I absolutely love being a small business owner, but I have to say, I lose a lot of sleep when thinking about making payroll, trying to mitigate cost increases and margin pressure. The impact of COVID has proven to me that businesses can survive and even thrive if we are allowed to pivot and innovatively solve problems. The sad truth over the last year has been that businesses that have failed in most cases was not a result of their own decisions, but on edicts and mandates from local, state, and federal governments. Thank you again for your time today.
Thank you very much. We'll now go ahead and move to Q&A. I'll go ahead and start things off. Mr. Challenger, I wanted to ask you first a little bit. You talked about how the Office of Rural Affairs helped you as you were working to stand up something completely new at CoBank, which was getting involved in SBA lending, specifically to help your clients accessing the Paycheck Protection Program. How did you find out about the Office of Rural Affairs? Did they come to you? Did you reach out to them? How did that relationship start?
Thanks for the question. It was such a fast-moving process. And if you remember when the PPP program was started, when it first opened, we weren't a licensed lender yet. We were an SBA lender. We were still trying to get our license. So through that effort in pushing to get our license, we made contact with several people in SBA, and were connected with the Office of Rural Affairs and put in touch with them.
That's very helpful. Thank you. And most of that was, we working directly with people over the phone, by email. You mentioned they did a couple of webinars, kind of like training to help you, your staff know how to access these loans.
Yeah, thank you for the follow-on question. Yeah, the staff there, we worked with Jeff, Renee, and Eric. They were on the phone with us and answered, I don't know, 200 plus emails between me and my colleagues, just navigating either the SBA system or the rules of the PPP program. They also hosted, with our help, 2 webinars for over 600 of our customers. Now, we didn't make PPP loans to all those customers, but they were also customers of ours. So they may have gotten a PPP loan through another financial institution, but the Office of Rural Affairs was instrumental in helping all of our customers, those 600. They followed up with, if they didn't know the answer to a question, they followed up within 24 hours and got that assistance from a technical perspective to our customers.
That's helpful. And I guess it's just another follow-up of setting aside the PPP loan program. As you look at CoBank's work with your clients going forward, how might the Office of Rural Affairs continue to be helpful in your mission within the Small Business Administration?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The health of rural communities is really important, and our efforts are somewhat limited, and our scope is limited. And so when we bring partners, if you will, to the table, like the SBA and the Office of Rural Affairs, the ability to deliver value to those constituents in rural communities it continues to increase. Our knowledge through the PPP program, our knowledge of SBA, and our contacts with the Office of Rural Affairs will just enhance the ability to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Oley, you talked a little bit about technical assistance partners. Can you maybe spend a little bit of time talking about some specific examples of technical assistance that's been helpful to rural businesses? Maybe you could also even just talk about this in the context of PPP, and if you could just add in, how can the Office of Rural Affairs help with this?
So technical assistance can range from a whole variety of needs for rural small businesses, anything from business planning to marketing to identifying how to use online marketplaces to better sell and produce products. For us, through PPP, our 2 CDFIs provide direct technical assistance alongside the funding that they're providing, so that they're ensuring those small businesses have the capacity and certainly can sustain operations moving forward. And so for us, it's a huge piece of that puzzle is pairing funding alongside technical assistance. And the Office of Rural Affairs, we reached out to them as well when CDFIs were not qualified as PPP lenders, to help advocate for that specific policy. That change was made, which obviously helped rural and tribal areas across the country to access the PPP funds in a much more expedited process.
Thank you very much. Just seeing that I've only got about 20 seconds left, I'll go ahead and reserve further questions for the panel later. I'll now recognize Mr. Williams for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today's hearing is all about small business recovery. which is why I find ironic since my colleagues on the left are also pushing for tax policies that will totally harm and hurt Main Street America. The Biden administration has proposed tax hikes to pay for the American Families Plan to advance the left's climate and social agenda, which will ultimately be financed on the backs of small business. Under the proposal, business organized as C corporations would see a tax increase from 21 to 28%. That's a lot. And considering there are roughly 1.4 million small businesses organized as C Corps, and they employ almost 13 million Americans, this dramatic increase will hurt small businesses just as they begin to recover from COVID-19, and it will cost jobs. The American Families Plan would also increase the individual tax rate, which also hurts small businesses who are structured as pass-through entities. So if we want to help small businesses recover, we cannot, I repeat, cannot be increasing taxes. So Mr. Crawford, can you talk about the long-term consequences on a small business like yours and even mine in the manufacturing sector if these tax hikes will be signed into law? And do you agree that the tax cuts and less regulations, that's the fix? We can talk all day long about this, but that's the fix to save rural America and small business.
I think what most people forget and don't hear in the news is that most small businesses have very, very thin margins. And when you're talking about a 2 or 3% net profit margin on a business, any increase in an income tax coupled with all the other taxes that may come in that I mentioned, property taxes that impact the local business, small business as well, that can translate to 30, 40, or 50% of your final net income, which is a big blow to a small business. So we see in the news companies making a ton of money, but we never hear about the private businesses because that information is just not published. But it's a huge impact and a big fear of any increase in that tax rate can be a huge blow to a small business.
No question about it. We know tax cuts increase employees and taxpayers. Tax increases do just the opposite. Just by talking about President Biden's potential tax hike, small business owners are on the defense. With looming threats of nearly doubling the capital gains tax, I've already spoken to businesses who are changing their operations and putting off investments because they are unsure what the tax code might look like in a year. Now, these are ridiculous increases. There's no question about it. And these increases will reduce long-term investments since there will not be the same profit incentive for those people willing to take a risk and bet they will be rewarded in the future. Our tax code should focus on getting people to invest, not to be penalized for their success. So, Mr. Crawford, have any of your day-to-day business decisions already changed due to the uncertainty and concerns that tax hikes, like we've talked about, may come to fruition?
It's incredible that you asked that question. We've actually been reviewing some capital purchases over the last 3 or 4 months that are significant purchases for us to invest in our business. We did that last year, made a significant investment in some equipment. We wanted to do the same thing this year, but frankly, with the state of the business, our cash flow impact, the concern over increase in tax rates coming up probably sooner rather than later has put all of that on pause. Our reaction to that is we need to hold on to cash. We need to be concerned about just margins in particular. And so the risk involved with investing in capital in an uncertain future is just too great right now. It's more of a wait and see.
Yeah, you're playing defense just on what you hear. Real quick while my time is going, can you discuss the workforce issues that you've experienced once the pandemic began to subside? I mean, here we are paying people to sit on the couch, paying people not to work. In Texas, as you know, we've stopped that and we've seen some movement. But why do you believe small businesses are still struggling to find workers?
I do think it's a reaction to the demand that we've seen, where our demand for employees has grown significantly, but there's an awful lot of people out there that aren't ready for whatever reason or don't want to come back to work. And I do believe that part of that is they have funding to not work, whether that is extended unemployment benefits. We're about to launch extended child care credits. That's going to be a significant cash flow to people that is in our demographic of people we hire for our jobs. And I believe that the difficulty is there's just not a pool of available workers that are willing and ready to come back to work.
Well, thank you. And my time is up, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
I appreciate that. Do we have any other members on the line right now? I know we saw a few, but it looks like they might have dropped off. All right. Well, I'm going to ask a few more questions. Mr. Crawford, actually, I was just listening to your testimony. Wanted to ask, you used the Paycheck Protection Program. Did you end up using a lender that you had like a pre-existing relationship with, or did you end up going to a new lender?
I did utilize that program, and it was with an existing lender, which was a large regional bank.
Do you have, I mean, I know that was a really successful program and one that was really critical to maintaining staffing for a lot of businesses, including your own. I'm sure you were appreciative of that. How, in general, do you have any feedback as a business owner about the program? Was it accessible and easy? Was it at times difficult as you were going through the application process, trying to figure out the rules? I know Congress kept changing the guidelines, and then of course you had to look at forgiveness, and I don't even know the status of your own loan. Has it been forgiven or not? You may not want to get into that, but any feedback for us in general about how that went?
It was very frustrating, to be truthful. I was in the first wave of it, so there was an extremely high amount of demand for that, and so there was a time critical element to try to get all of your application in, and the fact that the rules kept changing, the interpretation kept changing. It was really a stressful moment of were the funds going to be available by the time we could figure out how to do the application and get that submitted and get it approved. So yeah, it turned out to be a good program, but getting there was quite a challenge.
Yeah, it's very stressful, I'm sure, especially as you're just wondering how beneficial is this going to be at the end of the day, and is it going to actually help me keep these people on payroll? So did you find that your lender was able to help you as all these changes in guidelines were going on and advise you? Or did you have to figure it out, kind of putting your own time into that? Or who did you depend on to help you through that process?
As it turned out, the bank had about as difficult of a time. They were trying to navigate the rules for them from the lender perspective, and so honestly, it was such a large bank that I didn't get a lot of hand holding through that process, and had to answer the questions mostly on my own.
Yeah, I'm sure you put a lot of effort into that. Glad to hear that it ultimately worked out in a good way. I'm not, thoroughly familiar with Texas, although I am going to be doing a visit to Texas with one of my colleagues. By a bipartisan exchange program. He's going to come to Maine, and I'll come to Texas later on. But I think that won't be till sometime next year. But I see that you're outside of the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area. I think there's a small business development center, a partner with the SBA, about an hour away from you. Have you ever heard of them or worked with them at all?
I have heard of that group several years ago, but I've not personally worked with them.
Yeah, and anything through like the USDA, some of the programs they have for small manufacturers?
No, nothing with the USDA.
Yeah, I'm just curious. One of the things you said that really got my attention here in Maine, the Small Business Development Centers worked with a lot of small business owners at the beginning of the pandemic to help them pivot to say, geez, maybe if your whole product line is getting shut down, maybe we can pivot you into, something different here and try and try and make something good out of a bad situation, which is, I think at the heart of what you were saying about entrepreneurs being unleashed, to have the flexibility to make a change and survive. But it certainly, I think, was helpful for them to have a little bit of assistance in that. Sometimes having another, someone who's run a business in the past, step in and just help give you some business counseling can help you. But that's kind of what it's at the heart of the SBDC program, but also what we're talking about with the Office of Rural Affairs today. Could you see yourself ever using a program like that that's free to you through the SBA, or in general, do you think that you've got all the capacity you need in-house?
Well, I'd certainly say that we don't have all the capacity we need. I'm constantly looking for input, sources of information to improve my business operations. So I would definitely consider any of the sources that are available to us to improve our operations.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Mr. Williams, do you want to ask any follow-up questions? I'll give you another 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would ask Ms. Campos this, just kind of generically speaking. Ms. Campos, I'm a business owner. I employ hundreds of people down here in Texas and been in business 51 years. And I appreciate what you're doing. But do you agree with me and most small business owners that when we talk about these tax increases, it is detrimental to small businesses that are wanting to get started again, that tax cuts really put more money in the hands of these small business owners, so they have rainy day money, as we've heard Mr. Crawford talk about, rather than talking about tax increases. Tax cuts still work the best.
I would like to say in working with small businesses, that is an issue that we do come along every day. I think taxes are always an issue, regardless, to every business owner. But I would have to agree with you.
I think it's normal. If we have more money in our businesses, the more things we can do.
Absolutely.
Mr. Crawford, you and I and all of us face rising costs every single day and price pressures because you operate on thin margin as I do. You've talked about that in my business. What tools do you feel like you have at your disposal to react to these pressures from price increases and quite frankly, inflation that we see?
As a small business owner, we really don't have a lot of tools to leverage against big suppliers. We generally have to take what they tell us because we're not big enough to really leverage our cost power and pricing power with our vendors. So our only reaction is to either cut our costs in other ways, which is maybe labor costs or other costs, and then try to pass that on to our customers.
Well, and lots of times you and I know you can't pass it to the customer, and you can only cut expenses so much to make a profit. So that's why the tax cuts we had in 2016 really worked and enabled people to take risk and get reward. And I want to say this to everybody, and certainly the chairman, about the SBA. My goal is I want the SBA to be the small business provider for small business, what they are. And I hope down the road we can begin to do some things together that will let the SBA think more like a small business owner rather than a government employee. And I think that will help our small business people too. And I would just say this in closing, Mr. Challenger, I'm one of your customers. I'm in the cattle business back here in Texas. The PPP program at the end of the day worked. There was some confusion in the beginning, but I think all of us would agree that the PPP program through Treasury allowed us to get a lot of money. I don't know another system, a banking or credit union system, that anywhere in the world could have done what they did. So it did work, but we don't want people to rely on the government assistance. That's why we need to get back to cutting taxes and let small business create their own cash flow. with that in mind, Mr. Chairman, I yield my time back to you.
Just, I think just to close things up with the panel and just kind of thinking about what Mr. Williams just had to say, we're talking about the SBA really having the focus on the small business owner, not just from a lending perspective, but some of these other great programs we have from small business development centers and women business centers. In an office like the Office of Rural Affairs, which is really the subject of the hearing today, is how can we make sure that the Office of Rural Affairs can be there to be a voice and an advocate for small businesses, but in particular, small businesses residing in rural areas. I guess I'll just ask, how do each of you, and some of you have more experience than others with the SBA, but how do each of you feel that the Office of Rural Affairs could be useful to you and to your clients, given your experiences with them, or just given your experiences in general as a business owner? I think I'll start with Mr. Challenger, and then we can go to Mr. Oley, Ms. Campos, and then Mr. Crawford if you have any closing thoughts on it. But I'll start with you, Mr. Challenger, because I know you've actually had a pretty active interaction so far with staff at the Office of Rural Affairs.
Yeah, thank you for the question. My response is going to be have a couple elements to it. I think that the SBA brings one of the tools, if you will, in the toolbox to small businesses, whether they be rural or urban. I think particularly in rural communities, like Ms. Campos has expressed, they need technical assistance and they need additional attention oftentimes because they don't have necessarily access to all of the other I guess expertise that you might find in a larger community. So when I look at this as a small business administration, SBA is one piece of the whole pie, if you will. The USDA brings programs to the table. They're all different. As we say at CoBank, more options for customers is better, and more options for communities is going to be better. And so the SBA programs and the Office of Rural Affairs brings a number of expertises to the table, which helps the small businesses. They may not be the solution, but there are other solutions around, and the more collaboration and sort of coordination we have, the knowledge of cross agency products and things, I think will help continue to facilitate progress in rural communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Oley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think in order to be effective, the Office of Rural Affairs really, number one, needs to be fully staffed and have the capacity to address these issues. But it also has to have real authority to help expedite issues raised and address concerns of small businesses that are coming into the office. We also think, they should create some kind of advisory council or entity that really engages folks on the ground, people like Mr. Crawford and other small business owners, to make sure that they've got the voice of those communities and those small business owners. And finally, the intergovernmental kind of connection between other agencies. Mr. Challenger talked about the USDA programs, helping to understand the connection between small business growth, capital access, infrastructure like broadband and water and wastewater is really critical. And so also being that bridge between and among other federal partners.
Thank you. Ms. Campos.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So I think in our work, we not only service clients, but we also act as a key resource for many municipal economic development organizations. So when a local chamber of commerce has a question about federal programs, they often come to us. And I think this is where additional resources is a huge need, especially when it is something that within rural Nebraska, there is such a large distance or such a long drive time between one area to the other. So additional resources are essential to what we do. I also think this community-based need is a compelling reason to ensure our rural outreach at SBA, as it is prioritized and it is a priority that we do have. But I think really as we work with clients and community partners and leaders, currently, the Women's Business Center is one of the major SBA resources covering a large territory. So very crucial to have a rules affairs.
Of course, one of my favorite things you pointed out is that you go to the client, you meet them at their business, and meet them where they're at instead of forcing them maybe onto email or some platform they're not familiar with, or worse, having to drive hours when they really should be focusing on starting up their business or running the business. I love the resource partners that are able to get out in the field and go right to the business owner and see the business firsthand too. Mr. Crawford, anything that you want to add just about how an office like this might be helpful in rural business economic development?
Well, just real quickly, I do think the SBA and its branches have a very valuable role in supporting small business and small communities. I would say I'm a little hesitant when we talk about growing organizations in government. That typically is not very efficient, an efficient use of dollars. So I do think they have a role, but I agree with Representative Williams that you got to fund those things, and the taxes are just a huge problem to grow government, and in order to pay for that, the tax increases is a problem.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Actually, I think the interesting part about the story of the Office of Rural Affairs in the context of this hearing is this is an office that was created by Congress under the first Bush administration back in the 1990s, really to bring an emphasis in the work of SBA to rural businesses. I think there was a feeling back then, as I believe there is today, that a lot of times these programs end up not being fully accessible, or even many rural businesses aren't even aware that they're there, and how programs or lending opportunities or services might actually be available to them. Yet they're paying tax dollars into these SBA programs. Shouldn't we make sure some of that benefit returns back out to rural communities? A number of us on this committee in the last Congress in 2019 brought this to the attention of President Trump's administration. We were very pleased how responsive they were to agree with us that it was unacceptable that this Office of Rural Affairs existed in law and statute at SBA, but was completely unstaffed, essentially ignoring the mandate from Congress to ensure that rural communities were getting a focus and had a voice in the SBA. He very quickly worked to put in a acting director and some staff who ultimately were there to work with Mr. Challenger, as an example, in the midst of a pandemic that brought a lot of challenges to businesses. Who knows how many jobs were saved or benefited directly from the assistance that came out of the Office of Rural Affairs at that time. I think the timing was fortuitous, but I don't want to see it end there. I'd like to see it be successful moving forward. Really unfortunate that for over a decade and a half, the office was just allowed to fall by the wayside. But I know what you mean, Mr. Crawford, and we're trying to get a lot out of a very little here. Our bill that we are currently talking with a minority on, and I'm always looking for opportunities to work with my colleagues like Mr. Williams. Would bring this focus into the SBA for as little as $3 million a year, which as small business owners, people absolutely don't blink an eye at $3 million, but in the context of the federal budget, I think we can do a lot of good for rural businesses with a very well thought out office with a clear mission and some talented staff. So I think it's a worthy investment. I hope you all agree with me, and I look forward to working with Representative Williams, Representative Hagedorn when we get them back, and with the rest of the committee to try and do something for the Office of Rural Affairs in the years ahead, and by then for small business owners around the country. Mr. Williams, any closing remarks on your end? I appreciate your time today very much.
I think it's been a great hearing, Chairman, and I want to thank again the witnesses for taking time out of their busy day to come talk to us about this. There are some common ground issues in Washington, believe it or not. And I think we have some common ground here. The bottom line is we all realize, and one of you touched on it, that small business is half the income, half the workforce, even more than that is what generates this great economy. And we need to lessen the burden on small business, not increase it. That's going to be my goal and others too. So thank you again for taking time, and you, Mr. Chairman, for holding the hearing today. I yield back.
Well, thank you, sir, and thanks to all of our panelists for joining us today. We appreciate your testimony and answers you provided to our questions. With that, I would ask that there be unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days to submit statements or supporting materials for the record without objection, so ordered. If there's no further business before the committee, we're adjourned. Thank you all very much.